Blood ran down Beatrice's fingers as she scrubbed the saloon floor, her knuckles raw from the lye soap and endless hours of work. But she kept moving because back in Missouri, her mama and 3 younger siblings depended on every cent she could send home. The Silver Spur Saloon in Roswell, New Mexico Territory, was the kind of place where men forgot their troubles in whiskey and cards, and where a girl like Beatrice Edwards could make enough money in 3 months to keep her family fed for half a year. She had arrived 6 weeks ago on the dusty stage from Missouri, leaving behind her widowed mother and siblings after her father had died in a farming accident. At 19 years old, Beatrice had become the sole provider for her family, and working in a saloon was one of the few jobs that paid enough to make a difference. "Beatrice, table 7 needs clearing," called Martha, the older woman who managed the serving girls. Martha was kind enough, but she ran a tight ship, and there was no room for slacking in a place like this. Beatrice pushed herself up from the floor, wiping her reddened hands on her apron. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her simple gray dress was worn but clean. She had learned quickly that keeping her head down and working hard was the best way to avoid trouble in a frontier saloon. The men could get rowdy, especially after a few drinks, but she had mastered the art of deflecting unwanted attention with a polite smile and quick feet. As she approached table 7, 3 cowboys sat nursing their drinks. One of them looked up as she gathered empty glasses, and she felt his eyes following her movements. She had learned to sense when a man was just looking and when he might be a problem. "You are new here, are you not?" the cowboy asked. His voice was different from the others, more measured and respectful. When Beatrice glanced at him, she noticed he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that seemed tired but kind. "Been here about 6 weeks, sir," Beatrice replied, keeping her tone neutral and professional. "Long way from home?" he asked, and there was something in his question that made her look at him more carefully. He was not flirting or prying, just making conversation like a decent person might. "Missouri," she said simply, loading the last glass onto her tray. "That is a long journey for a young woman alone," he observed. "Family out here?" Beatrice shook her head. "Family back there. I am working to send money home." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of understanding or perhaps respect. He nodded slowly. "That is honorable, takes courage." Before she could respond, one of his companions laughed roughly. "Riley, you going soft. She is just a saloon girl." The man called Riley turned to his friend with a sharp look. "She is a working woman trying to provide for her family, Jack. Show some respect." Beatrice did not wait to hear more. She carried her tray back to the bar, but the brief exchange stayed with her. Most men in the saloon fell into 2 categories: those who ignored the serving girls entirely, and those who saw them as entertainment. This Riley seemed to be neither, and that made him interesting despite her best efforts to remain detached from everyone in this town. That night, after the saloon closed and she walked back to the boarding house where she rented a tiny room, Beatrice counted her tips by candlelight. 37 cents. Added to her daily wage of 50 cents, it meant she could send nearly $3 home this week. Her mother's last letter had mentioned that her brother Thomas needed new shoes for school, and her sisters Sarah and little Emma were outgrowing their dresses. The money never seemed like enough, but it was all she could do. Beatrice knelt beside her narrow bed and pulled out the small wooden box where she kept her family's letters. She reread the most recent one, her mother's careful handwriting describing the daily struggles and small victories of life without her. "We miss you terribly," her mother had written, "but we are so proud of your sacrifice. Thomas helps with the farm work, and the girls are learning to do more around the house. We pray every night for your safety and your return." The words made Beatrice's chest ache with loneliness. She had not realized how hard it would be to be so far from home, surrounded by strangers in a rough frontier town. But she had made a promise to keep her family together and fed, and she would keep that promise no matter how difficult. Over the next few weeks, the cowboy named Riley became a regular at the Silver Spur. He came in most evenings after work, usually with a few other ranch hands from the spread where he worked. Beatrice learned from the other girls that he was a foreman at the Rocking E Ranch, one of the larger cattle operations in the area. He was known as a fair boss and a hard worker, someone who had earned his position through skill and reliability rather than connections or luck. Riley always treated Beatrice with the same respectful courtesy he had shown on that first night. He never made crude remarks or tried to grab her arm as she passed. He tipped fairly and said please and thank you. In a place where such basic decency was rare, his behavior stood out. One evening, as Beatrice was serving his table, Riley looked up at her with an odd expression. "Might I ask you something?" Beatrice hesitated, then nodded. "I suppose. Your family in Missouri, are they managing all right without you?" The question caught her off guard. "They are getting by. I send money every week." Riley seemed to consider this. "Must be hard on them, hard on you too." "It is what needs to be done," Beatrice said simply. She did not want to discuss her personal struggles with a customer, even one as polite as Riley, but he did not let it drop entirely. "How long do you plan to stay out here?" "Until I have saved enough to get them through the next year or two. My brother will be old enough to take on more work by then, and my sisters can help my mother with sewing and such." Riley nodded slowly. "That is a long time to be away from family." "Do you have family, Mr. Riley?" Beatrice asked, turning the question back on him. "Riley is my given name. Last name is Emerson, Riley Emerson. And yes, I have family back in Texas, parents and 2 younger sisters. I send money home when I can, but it is not the same as being there." So they had that in common, Beatrice thought. Both of them were working far from home, trying to support families they could not see. It created an unexpected thread of connection between them. "I should get back to work," Beatrice said. Suddenly uncomfortable with how personal the conversation had become, Riley nodded. "Of course. Thank you for your time, Miss Edwards." She was surprised he knew her full name, but supposed he must have asked someone. As she walked away, she found herself thinking about him more than was wise. She could not afford distractions or complications. Her focus had to remain on earning money and sending it home. But Riley, Emerson seemed determined to become part of her life, even if just in small ways. He started timing his visits to the saloon for when she was working. He would ask how she was doing, if she had heard from her family, if there was anything she needed. His concern seemed genuine, and despite her best efforts to maintain professional distance, Beatrice found herself looking forward to their brief conversations. One night, a drunk cowboy grabbed Beatrice's wrist as she passed his table, pulling her roughly toward him. Before she could react, Riley was there, his hand gripping the man's arm. "Let her go," Riley said, his voice quiet but filled with steel. The drunk cowboy looked up, bleary-eyed and belligerent. "Who are you to tell me what to do? I am someone who does not like seeing women mistreated." "Let her go now." Something in Riley's tone made the other man release Beatrice's wrist. She stepped back quickly, her heart pounding. Riley did not move until the drunk cowboy turned back to his drink. Then he guided Beatrice toward the bar with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked. Beatrice nodded, rubbing her wrist. "I am fine, thank you." "That should not happen to you. You deserve better than this place." His words struck something deep inside her. She did deserve better, but better was not an option when her family needed money. "I am grateful for your help, Mr. Emerson." "Riley," he corrected. "Please call me Riley." From that night on, something changed between them. Beatrice felt safer when Riley was in the saloon, and he seemed to have appointed himself as her unofficial protector. Other men noticed and gave her less trouble when Riley was around. Martha noticed too and made a knowing comment about Beatrice having a cowboy looking out for her. But Beatrice tried not to let it mean anything. She could not afford to care about Riley Emerson or any man. Her life was temporary here, just a means to an end. When she had saved enough money, she would return to Missouri and her family, and this rough town and everyone in it would become just a memory. 3 months into her time in Roswell, Beatrice received a letter that changed everything. Her mother's handwriting was shakier than usual, and the words made Beatrice's blood run cold. Thomas had been injured helping a neighbor with his horses. The doctor said he would heal, but he needed medicine and care, and there was no money for it. Her mother had been forced to borrow from neighbors, accruing debts that weighed heavily on her conscience. Beatrice sat in her small room and cried for the first time since arriving in New Mexico territory. No matter how hard she worked or how much money she sent home, it was never enough. Her family was still struggling, still suffering, and she was powerless to do more than she was already doing. The next evening, Riley noticed immediately that something was wrong. When he asked, Beatrice brushed him off, but he was persistent. "Please," he said quietly, "maybe I can help." "No one can help," Beatrice said, the words coming out harsher than she intended. "My brother is hurt, my mother is in debt, and I am stuck here earning pennies while they suffer back home." Riley was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would change both their lives. "What if they came here?" Beatrice stared at him. "What? Your family? What if they came out here instead of you going back?" "That is impossible. The cost of passage for 4 people, the supplies they would need, finding a place for them to live. It would take more money than I could save in 2 years. Riley leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "I have been saving my wages for 5 years. I have nearly enough to buy my own piece of land and start my own ranch. That has been my dream." "But what good is a dream if you cannot share it with people you care about?" Beatrice's heart began to pound. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I will pay to bring your family west. All of them. Your mother, your brother, your sisters. I will arrange for their passage and make sure they have what they need to get here safely." "Why would you do that?" Beatrice whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Riley reached across the table and gently took her hand. "Because in the months I have known you, I have come to admire everything about you. Your strength, your determination, your love for your family. Because I think about you every moment of the day. Because I have fallen in love with you, Beatrice Edwards, and I want to help you and the people you love." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes. "You cannot mean that. You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are the finest woman I have ever met. I know I want to spend my life with you if you will have me. Bringing your family here is not charity. It is an investment in our future together. Riley, I cannot ask you to give up your dream for me. You are not asking, I am offering. And it is not giving up my dream, it is changing it. A ranch means nothing without family to share it with. Your family could live on the land I am planning to buy. Your brother could help work it. Your sisters could have a real home. Your mother would not have to worry about debts anymore." Beatrice pulled her hand back, overwhelmed. "This is too much. I need time to think." Riley nodded, his expression understanding but hopeful. "Take all the time you need, but know that my offer stands and my feelings for you are not going to change." That night, Beatrice lay awake for hours, her mind racing. Was it possible? Could Riley really bring her family west? And if he did, what would it mean for her? She was not sure if she loved Riley Emerson. She cared about him, certainly. He was kind and decent and had shown her more respect than any man she had known. But love, that seemed like a luxury she could not afford. Yet the more she thought about it, the more she realized that something had grown between them over these months. She looked forward to seeing Riley. She trusted him. She admired his work ethic and his values. Maybe that was enough. Maybe love could grow from respect and companionship. But the real question was whether she could accept such an enormous gift from him. It felt wrong to let him spend his life savings on her family. Yet if she refused, her family would continue to suffer while she remained trapped in Roswell, working at the saloon for months or even years to come. 3 days later, Beatrice sought Riley out. He was staying at a boarding house near the edge of town, and she found him in the evening sitting on the porch and looking out at the desert landscape. "I have thought about your offer," she said without preamble. Riley stood immediately. "And if you truly mean it, if you really want to help my family, then I accept. But I want to be clear about something. I will not let you do this as charity. If you bring my family here, I will find a way to pay you back, even if it takes me years." Riley shook his head. "That is not what I want." "Then what do you want?" He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "I want you to give me a chance, a real chance. I want you to let me court you properly. I want you to consider a future with me, not out of obligation, but because you want it too." Beatrice took a deep breath. "I will not lie to you, Riley. I do not know if I love you, but I think I could. You have been nothing but good to me, and that means more than I can say. So yes, you may court me. And yes, I will consider a future with you, but I will not make any promises I cannot keep." A smile spread across Riley's face, the first truly joyful expression Beatrice had seen from him. "That is all I ask. A chance." The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Riley met with Beatrice several times to discuss the details of bringing her family west. He wrote to a freight company that handled passenger transport and arranged for passage for 4 people from Missouri to New Mexico territory. He sent money ahead to cover their expenses on the journey and hired a guide to meet them in Independence and see them safely along the trail. Beatrice wrote to her mother explaining the situation. She kept the letter as factual as possible, not wanting to raise false hopes or complicate matters with emotional explanations. "A friend has offered to pay for your passage west," she wrote. "He is a good man who works as a ranch foreman here. If you are willing to make the journey, you could be here in 6 to 8 weeks. Thomas could find work here and we could all be together again. Please consider it." While they waited for a response, Riley continued his courtship of Beatrice. He took her to church on Sundays, one of the few respectable social activities available in Roswell. He brought her small gifts like ribbons and peppermints. He walked her home from the saloon each night, talking with her about his dreams for the future and asking about her life before coming west. Beatrice found herself opening up to him in ways she had not expected. She told him about growing up on her family's small farm, about her father's death in the accident that had crushed him under an overturned wagon. She described her mother's quiet strength and Thomas's determination to be the man of the family at just 14. She talked about her sisters, Sarah, who was 12 and loved reading anything she could get her hands on, and Emma, who was 8 and still believed in fairy tales. In turn, Riley told her about his own family. His father had been a ranch hand who had worked himself to exhaustion trying to provide for his wife and children. Riley had started working at 12, helping out where he could and saving every penny. By 18, he had hired on at a big ranch in Texas, and by 23, he had moved to New Mexico territory where the opportunities were better. He had worked his way up from regular ranch hand to foreman through sheer determination and skill with horses. "My father died 2 years ago," Riley said one evening as they walked. "Worked himself to death, really. I send money to my mother and sisters, but it is not the same as being there. I think that is why I understand what you are going through. The guilt of being away, even when you know you are doing what is best for them." Beatrice squeezed his hand. They had progressed to holding hands during their walks, a small intimacy that made her heart beat faster. "You are a good son and brother, Riley. Your family is fortunate to have you." "I hope someday you will think you are fortunate to have me too," he said softly. 4 weeks after Riley had sent the money and arrangements east, a letter arrived from Beatrice's mother. Beatrice's hands shook as she opened it, afraid of what it might say. "My dearest daughter," the letter began. "Your letter arrived like an answer to prayer. We have been struggling so much, and the thought of being together again fills my heart with hope. Thomas is healing well, and the doctor says he will be able to travel within 2 weeks. Sarah and Emma are beside themselves with excitement at the prospect of seeing you and traveling west. I confess I am frightened by such a long journey, but I am more frightened of losing our home and seeing my children go hungry. We will come, Beatrice. We will trust in God's providence and your friend's generosity. We should arrive in Roswell by early September. Your loving mother." Beatrice read the letter 3 times, then ran to find Riley. He was working at the Rocking E Ranch, but she did not care about propriety. She needed to tell him immediately. When she found him in the barn, checking on a mare that was about to foal, she threw her arms around him without thinking. "They are coming. My mother said yes. They will be here in September." Riley caught her, surprise and joy on his face. "That is wonderful news." Only then did Beatrice realize what she had done, how forward she had been. She started to pull back, embarrassed, but Riley held her gently. "I am glad," he said. "So glad." They stood there for a moment, and then Riley tilted her chin up and kissed her. It was a soft, sweet kiss that made Beatrice's entire body warm. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. "I am sorry," Riley said. "I should have asked permission first." "No," Beatrice said. "It was perfect." That kiss changed things between them. What had been careful courtship became something deeper and more certain. Beatrice found herself falling in love with Riley Emerson, truly and completely. His kindness was not an act. His generosity came from genuine goodness. He wanted to build a life with her, and increasingly she wanted that too. But there was still the matter of her family's arrival and what would happen after. Riley had mentioned buying land, but he had not given details. Beatrice needed to know what kind of life she would be bringing her family into. One evening, Riley took her to see the property he had been considering. It was several miles outside Roswell, a stretch of land near the Hondo River with good grazing and enough water to support cattle. There was a small house already built, rough but solid, and plenty of room to add on. "I was thinking," Riley said as they stood looking at the land in the golden evening light, "that we could build a larger house here. Big enough for your whole family. Your mother could have her own room and your siblings could each have space too. There is enough land that Thomas could learn ranching and eventually have his own herd. Sarah and Emma could have a real home, not just a rented room somewhere." Beatrice felt tears in her eyes. "You have thought of everything. I have been planning this for weeks. I want you to know that I am serious about taking care of you and your family. If you marry me, Beatrice, I will do everything in my power to make sure all of you have a good life here." The word marry hung in the air between them. They had not discussed marriage explicitly, though it had been implied in all their conversations about the future. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Beatrice said quietly. Riley turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "I am. I know we have not known each other long by traditional standards, but I know my heart. I love you, Beatrice Edwards. I love your strength and your courage and your devotion to your family. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" Beatrice looked into his gray eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and hope. She thought about everything he had done for her, the respect he had shown her, the way he had taken on her family's burden as his own. She thought about the kisses they had shared and the conversations that lasted long into the evening. She thought about the kind of man he was and the kind of life they could build together. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Riley swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her again, longer and deeper than before, and Beatrice felt her whole world shift into focus. This was right. This was what she wanted. They decided to wait until her family arrived before getting married. Riley wanted them to be there to see it, and Beatrice agreed. It would be hard enough for her mother to arrive in a strange place and find her daughter engaged to a man she had never met. Having the wedding immediately would be too overwhelming. In the weeks leading up to her family's arrival, Riley and Beatrice made their plans. Riley used the money he had been saving to make a down payment on the land near the Hondo River. He arranged for lumber and supplies to be delivered so they could start adding on to the existing house. He talked to his boss at the Rocking E about bringing on a young worker, paving the way for Thomas to find employment. Beatrice gave notice at the Silver Spur. Martha was sorry to see her go but happy for her circumstances. "That Riley Emerson is a good man," Martha said. "You are fortunate to have found him." "I know," Beatrice said. "I can hardly believe how much my life has changed in just a few months." The first week of September arrived, and with it came word that the wagon train carrying Beatrice's family had reached Fort Sumner, just a few days' travel from Roswell. Beatrice could barely contain her excitement and nervousness. It had been nearly 5 months since she had seen her mother and siblings. Would they be all right? Would they approve of Riley? Would they be able to make a life here in this harsh but beautiful land? Riley arranged to borrow a wagon from the ranch and drove Beatrice to meet the incoming wagon train. They waited at the edge of town as the dust cloud approached, resolving into covered wagons and tired travelers. When Beatrice spotted her family, she jumped down from the wagon before Riley could help her and ran toward them. Her mother, thinner than Beatrice remembered but smiling through tears, climbed down from the wagon and caught her in a fierce embrace. "Beatrice." "Oh, my darling girl, let me look at you." Thomas, taller and more serious-looking than when she had left, lifted Emma down from the wagon. Sarah jumped down on her own, and suddenly all 5 of them were hugging and crying and talking at once. Riley hung back, giving them their moment, but Beatrice pulled him forward. "Mama, this is Riley Emerson. Riley, this is my mother Catherine, my brother Thomas, and my sisters Sarah and Emma." Catherine Edwards looked Riley over with a mother's critical eye. "Mr. Emerson, I cannot thank you enough for your generosity in bringing us here. It is a debt we may never be able to repay." Riley removed his hat respectfully. "It is no debt, madam. It is my honor to help the family of the woman I love." Catherine's eyes widened slightly, and she looked at Beatrice. "Is there something you need to tell me, daughter?" Beatrice felt her cheeks flush. "Riley has asked me to marry him, Mama, and I have said yes." There was a moment of shocked silence, then Catherine laughed softly. "Well, I suppose we should get to know my future son-in-law then." The next few weeks were a blur of activity and adjustment. Catherine and the children moved into temporary lodging in town while Riley and Thomas worked on expanding the house on the new property. Beatrice stayed with her family but spent her days at the ranch, helping as much as she could and getting to know her siblings again. Thomas took to Riley immediately. The 2 of them worked side by side on construction and ranch work, and Riley taught the younger man everything he knew about horses and cattle. Thomas was a quick learner, and his earlier injury had healed well enough that he could do physical labor without trouble. Sarah was initially more reserved. At 12, she was old enough to understand the strangeness of their situation, arriving in a new place to find their sister engaged to a stranger. But Riley won her over by bringing her books from town, rare and precious items in a frontier settlement. He had asked what she liked to read and made a special effort to find novels and poetry collections for her. Little Emma was easiest. She declared Riley nice within minutes of meeting him, and soon followed him around like a puppy whenever he was near. Riley was patient and kind with her, answering her endless questions about cowboys and horses and the desert. Catherine was the hardest to read. She was unfailingly polite to Riley, but Beatrice could sense her mother's reservations. One evening, when they were alone in the small rented room, Catherine finally spoke her mind. "Beatrice, I need to know that you are truly choosing this for yourself and not because you feel obligated because of what he did for us." Beatrice took her mother's hands. "Mama, I love him, truly. I did not expect to, and I fought against it at first because I did not want to be distracted from my purpose in coming here. But Riley is good and kind and decent. He treats me with respect. He has dreams for the future that include all of us. I want to spend my life with him." Catherine studied her daughter's face, then slowly nodded. "I can see that you mean it, and I can see that he cares for you deeply. He looks at you like your father used to look at me. So if this is truly what you want, you have my blessing." "Thank you, Mama," Beatrice whispered, hugging her mother tight. They set the wedding date for early October, giving everyone time to settle in and giving Riley and Thomas time to finish the essential work on the house. It would not be fancy, but it would be enough for all of them to live together comfortably while they continued to build and improve. Riley's mother and sisters could not make the journey from Texas for the wedding, but he wrote to them telling them about Beatrice and promising to bring her to visit when they could manage it. His mother sent a letter back expressing her happiness for him and her eagerness to meet his bride. The wedding took place in Roswell's small church on a clear October morning. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress that Catherine had made over from her own wedding gown. Riley wore his best suit, brushed and pressed for the occasion. Thomas stood up with Riley, and Sarah stood with Beatrice. Emma sat in the front row with Catherine, barely able to contain her excitement. The ceremony was short and simple. When the preacher asked if Riley took Beatrice as his lawfully wedded wife, he said, "I do," with a voice full of conviction. When Beatrice gave her own vows, she looked into Riley's eyes and meant every word. "I do," she said, "with all my heart." They kissed as husband and wife, and Beatrice felt a wave of joy and relief wash over her. She had come to New Mexico territory out of desperation, forced by circumstances to leave everyone she loved. But somehow, through all the hardship and loneliness, she had found this good man who loved her and wanted to build a life with her. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. Several of Riley's friends from the Rocking E attended, along with Martha and a few of the other women from the saloon. There was food and music, and for a few hours, everyone forgot the hardships of frontier life and simply celebrated. As evening fell, Riley drove Beatrice out to their new home. Catherine and the children would stay in town for one more night, giving the newlyweds privacy. Riley had prepared the house as best he could, hanging curtains and making sure there was wood for the stove and food in the larder. Inside, Beatrice looked around at what would be her home. It was rough and simple, but it was theirs. Riley came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Beatrice turned in his arms and kissed him. I am happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me everything, Riley. My family is safe and together. I have a home and a husband I love. How could I be anything but happy? That night, as they lay together as husband and wife for the first time, Beatrice marveled at the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been alone and frightened, scrubbing floors in a saloon and sending every penny home. Now she was married to a man she loved, with her family nearby and a future full of possibility. The next morning, they brought Catherine and the children to the ranch. Everyone pitched in to unpack and settle in. The house was crowded with 6 people, but it was a good kind of crowded, full of laughter and conversation. Over the following months, their life together took shape. Riley continued working as foreman at the Rocking E while also building up his own small herd on their land. Thomas worked alongside him, learning the ranching business and proving himself to be a natural with cattle. Riley arranged for him to receive a small wage from the Rocking E, giving the young man his own money and a sense of independence. Sarah attended the small school in Roswell when it was in session and helped Catherine with housework and cooking when it was not. She had a quick mind and a love of learning that Riley encouraged, saying education was important even on the frontier. Emma, young enough to adapt to anything, thrived in the wide open spaces of New Mexico territory. She loved the animals and the endless sky and the warmth of having her whole family together again. Catherine kept the house and helped with the ranch work when she could. She had been worried about being a burden, but Riley made it clear that her presence was valued and important. She took care of the vegetable garden and the chickens, and helped Beatrice with the cooking and preserving that would get them through the winter. Beatrice herself learned the rhythms of ranch life. She helped with the cattle when needed, cooked meals for the family, and worked alongside Riley on improving their property. It was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way her time at the saloon had never been. She was building something that would last, creating a home and a life. Riley was everything a husband should be. He was patient and kind, passionate and hardworking. He consulted with Beatrice on decisions about the ranch and treated her as a true partner. He was also affectionate, stealing kisses when they passed each other during the day and holding her close at night. By December, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She told Riley first, catching him alone in the barn one evening. "Are you certain?" he asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "As certain as I can be. The signs are all there." Riley picked her up and spun her around just as he had the night she had agreed to marry him. "A baby, we are going to have a baby. You are pleased?" Beatrice asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Pleased?" "Beatrice, I am overjoyed. You have made me the happiest man in the territory." When they told the rest of the family at dinner that night, there were tears and excitement all around. Catherine cried and hugged them both. Thomas congratulated them with a handshake that turned into a hug. Sarah and Emma wanted to know everything about when the baby would arrive and whether it would be a boy or girl. The winter passed slowly but pleasantly. They were snowed in for a few weeks in January, but the family stayed warm and well fed. Riley had made sure they had plenty of supplies, and being confined to the house gave them time to just be together, playing games and telling stories and planning for the future. As Beatrice's pregnancy progressed, she found herself falling even more deeply in love with her husband. Riley was attentive and caring, always making sure she was comfortable and not working too hard. He talked to the baby through her belly and made plans for teaching their child to ride and rope. In early June, after a long and difficult labor, Beatrice gave birth to a son. They named him Robert James Emerson, Robert after Riley's father and James after Beatrice's father. He was a healthy baby with dark hair like his father and lungs that could wake the whole house when he wanted to be fed. Riley cried when he held his son for the first time, overcome with emotion. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. I love you so much, Beatrice." "I love you too," she replied, exhausted but happy. "Thank you for everything you have given me, for bringing my family here, for loving me, for this beautiful child. Thank you for changing my life." The baby's arrival brought new energy to the household. Everyone wanted to help with little Robert. Emma was fascinated by him and wanted to hold him constantly. Sarah was more practical, helping with washing and caring for him when Beatrice needed rest. Thomas proved surprisingly good at soothing the baby when he cried, walking him around the house and singing rough cowboy songs that somehow worked. Catherine was in her element as a grandmother, guiding Beatrice through the challenges of new motherhood and taking over household duties so her daughter could focus on the baby. Watching her mother with Robert, Beatrice was struck by how much easier life was when family could support each other. The loneliness and struggle of her time working alone in Roswell seemed like a distant memory. As Robert grew from an infant into a curious, active baby, the ranch prospered. Riley's hard work and good management paid off. Their herd grew, and he was able to hire additional help, taking some of the burden off himself and Thomas. The house was expanded again, adding more rooms so that everyone had adequate space. When Robert was 18 months old, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect or perhaps because her body was simply more prepared. In the spring, she gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret Rose, called Maggie from the start. She had Beatrice's blonde hair and Riley's gray eyes, and she was adored from the moment of her arrival. Riley proved to be a devoted father. He made time for his children no matter how busy the ranch kept him, playing with them and teaching them, and making sure they knew they were loved. Watching him with Robert and Maggie, Beatrice's heart swelled with love and gratitude. Sarah, now 16, had become a young woman. She had several suitors in town, young men drawn by her intelligence and quiet beauty. Riley was protective but fair, insisting that anyone who wanted to court her had to come to the house and meet the family first. It amused Beatrice to see her husband in the role of protective older brother, but she appreciated his care for her sister. Thomas, at nearly 19, had grown into a capable rancher. Riley had made him a partner in their growing operation, recognizing his hard work and dedication. Thomas was talking about eventually getting his own place nearby, staying close to family, but building something of his own. He had also started courting a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner, and seemed quite serious about her. Even little Emma, now 12, had found her place. She had a gift with horses that impressed everyone, and Riley let her help with training the young stock. She was fearless and skilled, and Riley said she had the potential to be one of the best horse handlers he had ever seen. Catherine, approaching 50, had found contentment she had not known since before her husband's death. She had her family around her, her grandchildren to dote on, and a secure home. She told Beatrice often how grateful she was that they had taken the risk to come west. "When you first wrote about coming out here, I thought you were being reckless," Catherine admitted one day as they worked in the garden together. "But you were brave, and look what came of that bravery. All of us together and thriving. You saved this family, Beatrice." "Riley saved us," Beatrice corrected. "I was just working in a saloon sending home bits of money. He was the one who made it possible for us to be together." "You both saved us," Catherine said firmly. "You for having the courage to leave home and do what needed to be done, and Riley for seeing your worth and loving you enough to help." You are both blessings." As the years passed, the Emerson Ranch became one of the most successful in the area. Riley's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher grew, and other operations sought his advice. He and Thomas worked as true partners, their operation expanding to include not just cattle but also horses, which proved even more profitable. When Robert was 5 and Maggie was 3, Beatrice gave birth to another son, William Patrick, called Will. 2 years after that came another daughter, Catherine Ann, named after Beatrice's mother and called Annie. Their house was full and loud and busy, but it was also full of love. Sarah married her beau from town when she was 19, a gentle young man named David who worked as a clerk in the territorial government offices. They settled in Roswell but visited often. Thomas married his sweetheart, Rebecca, when he was 21, and they built a house on their own piece of land adjacent to Riley and Beatrice's ranch. Emma, when she turned 18, surprised everyone by going to work for a horse breeder in Santa Fe, though she visited home regularly. Through it all, Riley and Beatrice's love deepened and strengthened. They faced challenges together, from droughts to difficult calvings to childhood illnesses. They celebrated victories together, from successful sales to children's milestones to the gradual improvement of their property. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Riley took Beatrice up to a hill overlooking their ranch. They sat together watching the sunset, his arm around her shoulders. "You ever regret it?" Riley asked. "Leaving Missouri, working in that saloon, ending up here?" Beatrice leaned against him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sage that always clung to him. "Never. Not for one moment. Everything I went through led me to you and to this life. How could I regret that? I think about that first night I saw you in the Silver Spur sometimes," Riley said. "You were working so hard trying to take care of everyone. I knew right then that you were special." "I thought you were just another cowboy," Beatrice admitted with a laugh. "I had no idea you would change my entire life." "We changed each other's lives," Riley said. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I love you, Beatrice, more now than on our wedding day, more every day. You are my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, and the love of my life." Beatrice kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. "I love you too, always." They sat together as the stars came out, talking about their children and making plans for the future. Robert, now 10, was showing an aptitude for business and would likely take over operations of the ranch someday. Maggie, at 8, was artistic and dreamy, always drawing or making up stories. Will, at 5, was adventurous and mischievous, keeping everyone on their toes. And little Annie, at 3, was sweet and loving, content to follow her older siblings around and try to do everything they did. "We have built something good here," Riley said. "Something that will last. Your family is secure and thriving. Our children will have opportunities we never dreamed of." "It is more than I ever hoped for when I first came west," Beatrice said. "I just wanted to send money home and keep my family fed. Instead, I found you and built a whole new life. Sometimes I still cannot believe how fortunate I am." "I am the fortunate one," Riley insisted. "You could have had any man you wanted. You chose me. You were the only one who saw me as a person, not just a saloon girl. You treated me with respect and kindness when I needed it most. Of course I chose you." As they walked back down to the house hand in hand, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From desperate poverty in Missouri to lonely work in a frontier saloon to this rich, full life surrounded by the people she loved. It had not been easy, but every struggle had been worth it. The house was bright with lamplight when they reached it. Through the windows, Beatrice could see her mother rocking Annie to sleep while Robert and Maggie played a game at the table, and we'll build something with blocks on the floor." It was a scene of domestic peace and happiness. "Home," Riley said simply, squeezing her hand. "Home," Beatrice agreed. That night, lying in bed with Riley's arm around her, Beatrice thought about that first night in Roswell when she had cried herself to sleep out of loneliness and fear. She had been so alone then, so uncertain of the future. But she had persevered, and that perseverance had led her to Riley and to this beautiful life they had built together. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Their children grew strong and capable, each finding their own path while remaining close to family. Robert took on more responsibility at the ranch, proving himself a worthy heir to what his father had built. Maggie's artistic talents led her to work with a printer in town, creating illustrations for local publications. Will talked of becoming a lawman someday, drawn to the idea of protecting people and upholding justice. And little Annie showed signs of inheriting her Aunt Emma's gift with horses. Riley and Beatrice grew older together, their hair graying but their love as strong as ever. They became respected members of the community, known for their generosity and fairness. Riley served on the town council and helped mediate disputes between ranchers. Beatrice worked with the church to help other families in need, remembering her own desperate circumstances and wanting to ease the burden for others. Catherine lived to see all her grandchildren grown and several great-grandchildren born. She passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 68, content in the knowledge that her family was secure and thriving. Her funeral was well attended, testimony to the many lives she had touched in her years in New Mexico territory. By the time Riley and Beatrice celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, their ranch had grown to be one of the largest and most prosperous in the region. Thomas's adjacent operation had also flourished, and together the two properties employed dozens of people and supported numerous families. But the true measure of their success was not in land or cattle or money. It was in the family gathered around their table for Sunday dinners. It was in the grandchildren playing in the yard. It was in the letters that came regularly from Emma, now married to the horse breeder in Santa Fe and raising her own family. It was in Sarah and David's visits with their children. It was in the sound of laughter and love that filled their home. On a warm evening in late June, Riley and Beatrice sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 50s now, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work and desert sun. But they sat close together, Riley's hand covering Beatrice's, comfortable in the silence that comes from years of companionship. "You remember what you said that first night at the saloon?" Beatrice asked. "When I told you I was working to send money home." Riley thought for a moment, then smiled. "I said it was honorable, that it took courage. You were the first person who saw me as more than just a girl doing what she had to do. You saw something worth respecting." "I saw the woman I was going to spend my life with," Riley said. "I just did not know it yet." "I am glad you brought my family west to me," Beatrice said softly. "I am glad you loved me enough to give up your dream of doing it alone." "I did not give up my dream," Riley corrected. "I just found a better one. A dream shared is a dream multiplied." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Robert rode up to the house with his wife and their 2 young children. They had come for dinner, and soon the house would be full of noise and activity again. Beatrice watched her son help his wife down from the wagon and lift his children out, and her heart swelled with joy. This was what she had worked for all those years ago in that saloon in Roswell. Not just survival, but this rich, full life surrounded by love and family. "Thank you," she said to Riley, squeezing his hand. "For what? For seeing me. For loving me. for bringing my family here and building this life with me, for every day of the last 25 years." Riley brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You never need to thank me for loving you, Beatrice. It is the easiest thing I have ever done." They rose together to greet their son and his family, walking into the house where the table was set and food was waiting. Through the window, they could see Maggie and her husband arriving as well, and in the distance, Will riding in from town where he now worked as deputy sheriff. The house filled with voices and laughter. 3 generations gathered under one roof. Beatrice moved among them, greeting each person, making sure everyone had what they needed. But her eyes kept finding Riley across the room, and each time their gazes met, she saw the same love and contentment reflected back at her. This was what happy endings looked like, Beatrice thought. Not perfection, but this solid, enduring love built on respect and partnership. Not ease, but the satisfaction of having worked hard for something worthwhile. Not wealth, but the richness of family and community and purpose. As they sat down to dinner, Riley said grace, thanking God for the food and for the family gathered around the table. When he finished, he added, "And thank you for bringing Beatrice into my life all those years ago. Everything good I have comes from loving her." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes, even after all these years. Riley still had the power to move her with his words and his sincerity. After dinner, as the children played and the adults talked, Beatrice stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The stars were brilliant in the clear desert sky, and a cool breeze brought relief from the day's heat. She could hear the sounds of cattle in the distance and the soft nickering of horses in the barn. Riley came out and stood beside her, not speaking, just being present. They stood together looking up at the stars, and Beatrice thought about the long journey that had brought them here. From a small farm in Missouri to a saloon in Roswell to this prosperous ranch and full life. From loneliness and struggle to love and security. From separation to reunion. "I never imagined this," Beatrice said quietly. "When I first came west, I thought I would work for a few months, send money home, and eventually go back to Missouri. I never imagined I would find you, that we would build all this, that life could be so good." "Life is good because we make it good," Riley said. "We work hard, we love each other, we take care of our family. That is all anyone can do." "It is enough," Beatrice agreed. "More than enough." They went back inside together, back to their family and the warmth and noise of a house full of love. The evening passed in contentment, with stories and laughter and the comfortable chaos of a family gathering. When everyone had finally left, and the house was quiet, Riley and Beatrice prepared for bed. After all these years, they still shared the same room and the same bed, still reached for each other in the night. "I love you," Riley said as they lay down together. He said it every night, had said it every night for 25 years. "I love you too," Beatrice replied, as she always did. The words never got old because the feeling never faded. As she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, Beatrice felt complete peace. She had started out just trying to help her family survive, working in a saloon and sending money home. But a cowboy had seen her worth and loved her enough to bring her family west to her. In doing so, he had given her everything she had ever wanted and so much more. This was their story. A story of sacrifice and love, of hardship overcome and dreams fulfilled. A story of a young woman far from home and a cowboy who changed her life. A story with a happy ending, not because everything was perfect, but because they had found each other and built something lasting together. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the desert wind whispered through the night, 2 hearts beat in perfect rhythm, bound together by love and commitment and the knowledge that they had found exactly what they needed in each other. This was home. This was family. This was love. And it was enough.